I was hauling hay bales with my gloves off when I heard it. The scream. A scream so loud and sharp it cut through the hot Texas air like a gunshot. I dropped the pitchfork and bolted across the ranch, heart pounding. The scream was coming from the old barn. The barn I had locked, the barn with the basement, the barn where Hank lives. Now let me tell you something before you freak out. Hank is not a person. Hank is a bear. A live, breathing, full-grown grizzly I rescued as a cub after a flood washed him up from the nearby wildlife reserve. He'd been injured, starving, and abandoned. I built him a space underneath my barn, worked with professionals, got him vet care, and followed all laws. He's not a pet. He's a permanent rescue. The only rule? You don't enter the barn unless I'm with you. And HOA Karen just broke that rule. I raced across the field screaming, "Don't move, do not move." But it was too late. I could already see her, hair puffed up like a cotton ball, phone in hand, camera pointed at the barn walls, and high heels in the dirt of all things, screaming her lungs out. She was halfway down the cellar stairs, and Hank was growling. He hadn't attacked. Not yet. But he stood at the bottom of the barn basement, half lit by a dusty ceiling bulb, rising up on his hind legs, a low thunder rolling from his throat. Karen froze halfway down the stairs. Her phone slipped from her hand and tumbled down the steps, landing a foot from Hank's massive paws. "What is that thing?" she screamed, legs trembling. "Is that a real bear?" And that's when the metal latch on the cellar door suddenly snapped shut behind her, trapping her inside. I had only seconds to reach her. But let me take you back to the beginning. Hi, I'm Noah Jacobs. I'm a 41-year-old retired forest ranger turned ranch owner. I live in a quiet part of rural Texas on 16 acres of land passed down from my grandfather. I'm not rich. I'm not flashy. I grow my own food, raise a few animals, and have a solar roof. My peace means everything to me. Then came the HOA. See, I'm not even in the HOA. My land is fully independent. But when the folks from the new neighboring development called Sunset Valley Estates started moving in, they got the idea that everyone in the area should follow their rules. That included dress codes, trash schedules, lawn heights, and get this, what color we could paint our mailboxes. Enter Karen Monroe, blonde bob, red lips, always dressed like she's going to a fashion show, even to get the mail. She called herself president of the Sunset Valley HOA, even though I didn't live there. That didn't stop her from marching onto my land the day after I put up a private property, no trespassing sign, and saying, "You'll need to remove that. It's an eyesore." I told her as politely as I could, "Ma'am, this is not HOA property. You don't make the rules here." She scoffed. "Oh, we'll see about that." At first, I laughed her off, but then came the letters taped to my gate. Then the anonymous reports to animal control claiming I had dangerous wild animals. And then last week, the gate cameras caught her standing on my property, photographing my barn and pointing at it like it was Area 51. I should have confronted her harder, but I was raised to pick my battles. I just didn't think she'd go this far. That brings us to today. It was hot and dusty. I was doing my daily chores, McKing the stalls, checking the well pump, loading feed when I saw tire marks, not my truck, not the delivery van. These were fresh, narrow tracks like from a little SUV. They led around the side of my ranch toward the barn. I froze. Nobody goes to the barn. Only I have the key. Only I know about the hidden latch that opens the basement door. Unless Karen, I ran. And now here we are with her standing halfway down the stairs, face pale as milk, trapped between a locked door and a 700-pound bear who really doesn't like strangers. "Hank, easy boy. It's okay," I called as I raced to the door. Karen turned slowly. "What is this place? What is this?" The bear didn't roar. He didn't charge. He just gave that low, warning growl. He didn't want to hurt her, but he was scared. And when he's scared, he's dangerous. I reached the latch locked from outside. "Back away slowly," I shouted. "Don't run. Do not scream." "Open this door," she shrieked, stomping her foot. The stomping echoed down the wooden stairs. "Bad idea." Hank stepped forward. Karen froze again. "I told you this place was illegal," she shouted, as if volume was her weapon. "You can't keep a bear under a barn. I'm calling the authorities." "Lady," I growled, trying to unlatch the rusted lock. You're lucky he hasn't eaten your phone." She was too scared to laugh. With a final yank, I pried open the latch and pulled the cellar door wide. I took a deep breath and slowly walked down the stairs, one hand up to calm Hank. "Back off, bud. She's not a threat," I said gently. He sniffed the air, then lumbered backward. Karen bolted up the stairs like a rabbit out of a trap. But the second she hit daylight, she spun and pointed a finger in my face. "This is not over, Mr. Jacobs. I'm pressing charges. You endangered my life." "On my property," I said calmly. "Where you trespassed. Broke a locked door after being warned not to come near the barn." She ignored me, stormed off to her shiny white Lexus, heels caked in mud, and sped off without another word. I knelt beside Hank, who was now lying down peacefully again, chewing on an old tire. I scratched the top of his big head. "Good boy," I muttered. "Sorry for the noise. You'd think that would be the end of it. You'd think Karen had learned her lesson." But the next morning I woke up to flashing lights outside my ranch gate. A sheriff's cruiser, 2 animal control trucks, and behind them, Karen Monroe, arms folded, smirking like she'd already won. This time she didn't come alone. "Where are you watching from, folks?" Because what came next had me questioning everything I knew about peace, law, and justice. And it wasn't even the craziest part of this story yet. The air was tense. My boots crunched on the gravel. As I stepped toward the gate, I counted 4 uniformed officers, 2 from animal control, 1 deputy sheriff, and a woman in a white shirt with a clipboard who looked like she came straight from a city office. They were all parked neatly behind Karen's Lexus, which was now spotless despite the mess from yesterday. Her arms were crossed, lips pursed like she just swallowed a lemon, and she was smiling. "You got 5 minutes to open the gate," the sheriff said. I didn't move. "On what grounds?" Karen was the first to speak. "On the grounds that you're harboring a dangerous wild animal and that you assaulted me with it yesterday." "Assaulted?" I blinked. "Lady, you broke into my barn and got yourself trapped in a room with Hank. You could have been mauled. You're lucky I showed up when I did. You didn't warn me there was a bear living under that thing." She barked. "You weren't supposed to be there at all," I snapped back. The animal control officer stepped forward. "Sir, we received a report of an illegally housed wild animal. Are you keeping a bear on the premises?" I took a deep breath and walked back into the house. Karen shouted, "He's running." The sheriff didn't flinch. "Ma'am, calm down." Inside, I returned with a folder, documents, vet records, permits, and everything showing Hank was registered as a wildlife rescue under federal and state guidelines. I held it out. The animal control lady skimmed through them slowly. Hank Jacobs, grizzly bear, male, rescued during a 2017 flood, license under Emergency Wildlife Rehabilitation Code 47A, updated rabies tag, microchipped, vet reports, vaccinations. She flipped another page. Karen was tapping her foot. "Well," she demanded, "isn't this illegal?" The woman gave her a cold glance. "No, actually it's legal. More than legal. It's one of the best kept records I've seen." I smirked. "Told you." But Karen wasn't done. She turned to the sheriff and practically screeched. "He locked me in a basement with a live bear." The sheriff raised his eyebrows. "And how did you get in there?" "I was investigating," he frowned. "So you trespassed." Karen blinked and broke a padlock, he added. She went quiet. I leaned on the gate. "This is private property. I have cameras. You broke and entered. I never gave you permission to be on my ranch." Her face flushed red. "You people think you can do anything you want out here." "Well, I represent the HOA, and we don't allow wild animals." The clipboard woman spoke for the first time. "Ma'am, this property isn't in your HOA's jurisdiction. It's a separate land parcel, legally exempt." Karen looked like she'd been slapped. "But it's unsafe," she blurted. "That bear's a threat to children." "There are no children here," I said calmly. "Only adults who mind their business." The sheriff turned to me. "Mr. Jacobs, you're not under arrest. You're in the clear." Karen's jaw dropped, but he continued. "I'd suggest putting up more signs and locking that barn better just for safety." "I'll handle it," I nodded. Karen turned away without a word. She marched back to her Lexus, yanked the door open, and slammed it shut. For the first time, she looked like someone had actually shut her down. As they all drove off, I stood in the dusty driveway, watching their cars disappear into the hills. It should have ended there. But the next day I got a letter in the mail, a cease and desist notice from the Sunset Valley HOA legal department, claiming I had violated community peace safety ordinances and created a hazardous environment. That's when I knew Karen wasn't backing off. She was escalating. I poured myself some black coffee and sat on the porch with Hank's head resting near my feet. He loved the porch. It was shady and cool. He'd lay there for hours, snoring like a chainsaw. "Buddy," I whispered, "we've got a war coming." The next week was quiet. Too quiet. No more letters, no more visits, no sightings of Karen. I even started to relax. I figured the legal team had laughed her out of the room. I thought maybe she'd realized how ridiculous she'd looked. I was wrong. It was the Friday before Memorial Day. I was getting ready to haul some supplies into town when I noticed something strange near the barn. Footprints, 2 sets, human boots, fresh, and the barn latch open. I dropped my grocery bags and ran. Inside the barn, the basement door was wide open. The lights were off and Hank gone. My stomach dropped. Then I heard it, a whimper, faint, muffled, coming from under the floorboards. I flicked on the light and slowly descended the stairs. And that's when I saw it. A cage, a steel trap cage. And inside it, Hank sedated, his eyes barely open. And standing next to the cage was a man in a Sunset Valley HOA polo shirt, holding a long pole. He looked up, shocked to see me. "Oh, sir," he stammered. "This is a scheduled wildlife removal. We got authorization." "Authorization from who?" I bellowed. He opened his mouth, but before he could speak again, something clanged loudly above us. The barn doors slammed shut. Someone else was still here. I grabbed the man by the collar. "You're going to explain exactly what's going on," I growled. And then bang! A sudden explosion of wood from above us. Smoke, sparks. The old barn caught fire, flames licking down the sides of the stairwell. We were trapped. Me, Hank sedated in a cage, and the HOA goon locked in a burning barn basement. And whoever shut the doors, they were still out there watching, waiting. The heat rolled in fast. Flames spread across the upper half, licking at the rafters. Smoke pouring down through the cracks in the floor above us, like thick fog. My eyes burned. I could barely breathe. The HOA man dropped the pole and screamed, "We gotta get out of here." "No kidding," I growled, already moving toward Hank's cage. But Hank was groggy, barely conscious. His eyes were open, but sluggish. They drugged him. He couldn't walk, let alone escape on his own. I looked around desperately. There wasn't time to haul him out the stairs. We needed another way out. My mind raced back to a memory. The old storm drain tunnel behind the barn. It hadn't been used in years, but it connected right to the basement's back wall. I sprinted across the basement and shoved aside the feed bags in the far corner. There it was, partially buried, rusted, but still visible. A steel-plated square hatch in the concrete wall. I kicked at it once, twice. Clang. The bolt shook loose. The tunnel was narrow, just wide enough for a bear if we slid the cage through sideways. I turned to the guy still coughing and panicking beside me. "Help me move him. I didn't sign up for this, man. You sedated my bear and trapped him in a cage. You're helping me get him out or we all burn." He swallowed and nodded, terrified. We hoisted the cage together and started dragging it toward the tunnel. Every second counted. I could hear the crackle of wood splitting above us, debris falling from the ceiling. Flames had now started creeping down the stairs. "Hank, stay with me," I muttered as we shoved the cage into the opening. The bear grunted softly. The tunnel was only about 30 feet long, but it felt like a mile. Sweat dripped into my eyes. My shirt clung to me. The air was thick with smoke and fear. We pushed and pulled the cage inch by inch. Finally, daylight. We burst out behind the barn, out into the field where the tall grass had started to catch fire at the edges. The HOA guy collapsed on the ground, coughing violently. I grabbed a tarp from the fence and threw it over the cage to block the sun from Hank's face. Then I turned and I saw her, Karen Monroe, standing at the tree and holding a remote in her hand, wearing sunglasses, watching. She wasn't even hiding. "You did this?" I whispered. She smirked, then turned and walked back toward her Lexus, parked just out of view from the road. By the time the volunteer fire crew arrived, the barn was mostly gone. Blackened beams, ash, only a few stone walls still standing. Could have been worse, the chief said. If the wind had picked up, your whole ranch might have gone up. I nodded numb. Hank was safe now, sleeping off the sedative in the cool of my garage, wrapped in cold towels and surrounded by fans. But I wasn't calm. Not anymore. This was arson, an attempted animal theft, and someone had to pay. That evening, I called my lawyer. You need to report everything, she said. But first, move the bear. She's not going to stop until she ruins you. So I did. I loaded Hank into the horse trailer the next morning and took him to a friend's rescue center 3 hours away. He'd be safe there, away from HOA drama, away from danger. But me, I had a war to fight. When I returned to the ranch, I found my mailbox had been smashed again. A letter shoved through the broken flap. Notice of code violation, structural damage. Barn not to code. Cleanup required within 7 days. At the bottom, HOA Sunset Valley President Karen Monroe. I laughed out loud. She'd set the barn on fire, and now she was finding me for it. It was time to gather evidence. I went to the barn ruins with a camera and began documenting everything. Melted hinges, burned padlocks, blackened footprints near the door. I traced the shoe prints back to a fresh tire mark. Too small for a fire truck. Just right for a certain Lexus. I uploaded the footage to my computer. Then I sent it to 3 places. My lawyer, the sheriff, and the local news station. Within 48 hours, Channel 5 News was calling it the Bear Basement Fire Scandal. And suddenly, Karen wasn't smiling anymore. She released a public statement claiming deep regret for the incident, but denied any wrongdoing. She blamed an anonymous volunteer from the HOA committee and said she was shocked to learn about the fire. Lies. But that wasn't all. The sheriff called me personally 2 days later. We're launching an investigation, he said, and that HOA guy you found in the basement. He's talking. Turned out Karen had paid him under the table. No official paperwork, no real animal control involvement, just a bribe, a cage, and a promise of a quick job. That meant conspiracy, trespassing, animal cruelty, attempted theft, and now arson. Karen was cornered, but she wasn't done yet, because that same week, someone filed a motion at City Hall to annex my land into the HOA. If that passed, they could claim control over my entire ranch legally. It would be the final move unless I stopped it. So I made a decision. The night before the city council vote, I rolled into town with my truck, a copy of every document and something else. Hank's story, photos, videos, vet records, news coverage, footage of the fire, the unauthorized HOA trap job, and the interview with the guy who admitted to working under Karen's orders. I didn't just show up to the meeting. I brought the truth with me, but just as I parked my truck in front of the building, a man in a black hoodie stepped out of the shadows and slashed my rear tire. I jumped out, yelling, but he ran and taped to the windshield. A single piece of paper. Back off, or next time it's you. The bear wasn't the only one in danger now. I stood there for a long moment, clutching that paper in my hand as the late evening wind whispered across the parking lot. The words were sharp, printed in bold capital letters with a thick black marker. There was no signature, no name, just a threat. I looked around, empty streets, shadows shifting. Whoever had slashed my tire was gone. But that message, it was loud and clear. I wasn't just fighting an HOA anymore. I was fighting something darker, something personal. I changed the tire with the spare I kept in the bed of my truck, then walked into the town hall with dirt on my hands and a folder full of proof. The city council chamber was already packed. Nearly every seat taken by residents from Sunset Valley and a few old-timers from the ranching community. Everyone was buzzing. A news crew was setting up in the back. At the front row, Karen Monroe, perfect white blouse, hair curled, lips glossed. She didn't even look at me when I walked past, but her smirk, that same smug expression from the barn fire, was carved across her face. I sat down and waited. One of the council members stood up. Next on the agenda is the annexation request filed by the Sunset Valley Homeowners Association for surrounding properties. A murmur swept through the room, including the Jacobs Ranch. Now she looked at me slowly as if she had already won, but I stood. Mr. Jacobs, you'll have 3 minutes to speak, the councilman said. I walked to the podium, my boots thewing against the wooden floor. I held up the file in one hand and looked around the room. My name is Noah Jacobs. I was born and raised in this town. I've spent the last 15 years caring for land that's been in my family for 4 generations. That land was never part of an HOA, and it never will be. The room fell quiet. I opened the folder and pulled out photos. This is my barn before and after it was burned to the ground. I held up a burned metal latch. This is the lock that was forced open the day Karen Monroe trespassed. Then the final image, Hank sleeping peacefully in the sun with his paw over his snout next to a pile of hay. This is Hank, a federally registered, rehabilitated wildlife rescue. He lived safely in a secured enclosure on my property for 6 years, without incident until this HOA decided they knew better than the law. Gasps echoed through the chamber. I kept going. They tried to steal him, drug him, lock him in a cage. When that didn't work, they lit a fire under my barn with a man and a bear still inside. And when that didn't stop me, someone slashed my tire outside this building and left me a note telling me to back off or else. I placed the threatening note on the table for everyone to see. I have the truth. I have the records. And now, so do you. I stepped down. The room exploded into whispers. The city council went into deliberation right there. Karen. She stood and stormed out, but not before she turned around, jabbed a finger at me and shouted, "You'll regret this. You think you're some hero? You're just a washed-up hick with a freaking bear." Everyone stared. The sheriff, seated at the back, slowly rose and walked out behind her. A few minutes later, the council returned. The head of the board cleared his throat. After reviewing all available documentation and statements, the city council unanimously denies the request to annex the Jacobs Ranch into the Sunset Valley HOA. Furthermore, we are opening a formal investigation into misconduct by HOA leadership. Applause broke out, not from everyone, but enough. Outside, people shook my hand. Old ranchers patted my shoulder. The Channel 5 reporter asked for an exclusive. I gave them a short quote and walked back to my truck. But I still felt uneasy because Karen wasn't the kind of person to walk away, and she didn't. That night, I got a knock on the door. I opened it to find Deputy Ramirez on my porch. She looked grim. "We arrested the guy who confessed to the cage job," she said. "He told us something off, said Karen didn't act alone." I frowned. "Then who did?" She looked around, then stepped closer. "There's a group, a few HOA members from different neighborhoods in the area. They've been talking about cleaning up the community, pushing out ranchers and older residents to bring in luxury developments." I blinked. A land grab? More like a shadow HOA. Unofficial, but connected. Karen's just loud. Someone else is pulling strings. My stomach turned. "So she's the front." Ramirez nodded. "We're digging deeper, but you need to watch your back." And she wasn't lying because the very next morning, someone broke into my garage. They didn't take anything. They just left something on the workbench. A photo of me and Hank taken from a long lens through the trees and written on the back in red marker, "You shouldn't have spoken." That afternoon, I walked the perimeter of my property and found something else. A trail cam mounted high in a tree pointed directly at my house. I pulled it down and smashed it with a hammer. This wasn't about the HOA anymore. It was about power. And if they wanted a fight, they were about to get one, because I had one more trick up my sleeve. Something they didn't know about. Hank had a twin. Not another bear, but a friend. A woman named Ellie Pierce. Former Army K-9 handler, wildlife enforcer, and rancher like me. She owed me a favor, and she was on her way. And when she arrived, the game would change completely. 3 days later, Ellie's truck rolled onto my ranch just as the sun was dipping low behind the hills. Her dusty black pickup looked like it had wrestled a tornado and won. On the back window, a faded sticker of the Texas Rangers badge and an even older one that read, "Don't tread on me." She stepped out wearing worn jeans, boots that had seen war, and a camo hat pulled low over sharp green eyes. I hadn't seen her in 6 years, but she walked up like not a day had passed. "Noah," she nodded, "heard you've got HOA cockroaches." I smiled for the first time in weeks. You could say that they tried to kidnap Hank. Then they tried to burn my barn. Now they're spying on me. Ellie didn't flinch. You still got your trail cameras? Yeah. Good. Then let's catch him in the act. We walked the perimeter, marking weak points in the fence and installing fresh motion sensors. Ellie brought gear. Gear I hadn't seen since my old days in federal forestry enforcement. Night vision cams, IR trip beams, audio pickups. She wasn't just visiting, she was hunting. And that night, we got our first hit. At 3:12 a.m., one of the cameras near the eastern fence line lit up. Ellie and I were awake watching live feeds from the kitchen table. Two figures crept along the boundary, one crouched low with a flashlight, the other carrying a small box. Pause, Ellie whispered. She zoomed in. It was one of the HOA board members, Tim Rowland, real estate agent by day, HOA board by night, and the other guy, the same man who had been caught in my barn. Bingo, Ellie grinned. Let's greet them. We grabbed flashlights and headed out, staying low in the tall grass. The night air was cool and the frogs were loud, too loud for them to hear us approach. As we reached the fence, Ellie called out, "You boys lost?" They jumped like spooked deer. Tim stammered, "This is, public land." "No, it's my land," I growled, flipping on the floodlight that bathed them in bright white. They froze like statues. Ellie took a step forward. "Care to explain the box?" "No comment," the second guy muttered. "Thought so." We confiscated the box and watched them scurry back into the woods like rats. Inside the box, a signal booster wireless used for trail cam broadcasting over long distances. They weren't just watching, they were sending live footage to someone. Ellie examined the device. Military grade. Someone's funding them. My skin crawled. We took the box to the sheriff the next morning. Ramirez's face darkened. "That's not HOA level. That's something else." She tapped a few keys and referenced the serial number registered to a security firm in Houston owned by a holding company. "Guess who's on the board?" "Karen," I guessed. She shook her head. Her ex-husband, Michael Lane, multi-millionaire developer, specializes in flipping land, turning farmland into mega residential estates. He's been buying up properties in counties all around here. Quietly, Ellie let out a low whistle. "Now we know who's really behind this." Ramirez nodded. "And they were counting on you being too quiet, Noah, that you'd fold." "But I didn't," I said. "No," Ramirez agreed, "you didn't. That afternoon I met with my lawyer and filed a restraining order against Karen, Tim, and the other guy. We also sent cease and desist letters to the security firm and its parent company. But that wasn't enough. They were still watching, still lurking. So Ellie and I set a trap. We reinstalled one of their own cameras right at the barn ruins, but this time we rewired it, fed it false footage. Instead of a live feed, we played a loop of me feeding Hank, made it look like Hank was back, and then we waited. 2 nights later, someone came back alone, dressed in black, face hidden. They crept into the barn ruins and began prying up the old floorboards right over where Hank's basement cage had been. Ellie watched the camera feed. She leaned close and whispered, "It's Karen." My jaw tightened. "She's coming in alone," I said, surprised. "Means is desperate," Ellie replied. "And that makes her sloppy." Karen found nothing, just old concrete and ashes. But she stayed, sat down on the stone slab, and lit a cigarette, looking around like she owned the place. We crept in behind her. When the flashlight beam hit her back, she froze. "You're trespassing again," I said. She turned slowly. "Oh, look, it's Cowboy and G.I. Jane," she sneered. "You know, most people would have stopped after burning down a barn," Ellie said coldly. "But you just keep digging your hole deeper." Karen stood up, brushing ash from her pants. "I don't care what you think. That bear was dangerous. You endangered this whole community." "No," I replied. "You endangered everyone. And now we know who's funding you." That stopped her. "What?" "We know about Michael. The cameras. The land grabs," Ellie added. "We have evidence, video, audio, paper trail. You're done." Karen's face changed. Not angry, not scared, smug. "You think this ends with me?" she said softly. "You think Michael's afraid of you?" She took a step forward. He owns the county board, the zoning office, the permits. He'll get this land one way or another. I stared at her. Then I smiled. Then we'll make sure the whole country watches him try. The next morning, the national media picked up the story. The Channel 5 segment had gone viral. Bear hero versus HOA bully. The headline read, "Talk shows invited me to speak." Wildlife groups backed me. Even state senators commented. But the final blow, an anonymous source leaked a full dossier on Michael Lane's illegal land purchases, bribery, and shadow HOA tactics. It hit the headlines like a hammer. Within 72 hours, Michael was under federal investigation. Karen arrested for arson, trespassing, and conspiracy to commit animal theft. And me? I stood on my porch as the sheriff drove away with both of them in cuffs. Ellie joined me with 2 mugs of black coffee. Hank, now fully recovered, sat beside us with his nose in the wind. "You won," she said quietly. I shook my head. We won, and just when we thought it was over. Ellie's phone buzzed. She looked at the screen, frowned. "Problem?" I asked. She turned the phone toward me. "An email, no name, just one line. Phase 2 begins now. Enjoy the quiet while you can." It wasn't over, not even close. The sun was just beginning to rise when Ellie and I sat on the porch again, both of us staring at the message like it was a ticking bomb. That one line, Phase 2 begins now. Enjoy the quiet while you can, clung to the air like smoke. "Fake email address," Ellie muttered, fingers flying across her phone. "Encrypted, routed through multiple servers." "Someone doesn't want to be found," I said. "No," she agreed, "but we'll find them anyway." I stood and walked out to the barn ruins, now fenced off and still smelling of charred wood and old concrete. Hank followed lazily, nuzzling my leg and groaning like a sleepy dog. I knelt and rubbed behind his ear. He was doing better now, eating, walking, sniffing the breeze, but I could tell he still remembered, and now someone else was coming. That evening, Ellie sat at my kitchen table, laptop open, zooming in on maps and zoning plans. "Noah," she said suddenly, tapping the screen. "Look at this." She turned the laptop around. There it was, a zoning change request submitted just a few weeks ago. Quiet, hidden under community improvement plans. "They want to build a private access road," she said, "right through the back edge of your land." I leaned in, but that area is protected, only if you have the title deed to those boundary acres. My stomach turned. Those were the plots my grandfather added in 1986. We'd always considered them part of the ranch, but I hadn't checked the updated land records in years. I drove into town the next morning and stood in a stale government office for 2 hours waiting for a clerk to print out my current land map. And when she handed it to me, I stared in disbelief. 2 acres missing, I said. She double-cheeked. "That's what's in the system. Looks like a quitclaim deed was filed back in March. Sold for $10. "To who?" I asked. She typed, then paused. "Sunset Valley Development Group." I didn't sell that land. I never signed a quitclaim deed. Someone forged it. My blood boiled. I called Ellie. "We've got fraud," I told her. "I'm going to expose it." But it was already too late. When I got back to the ranch that afternoon, heavy machinery was parked near the edge of my property. 2 bulldozers, a crew of men in hard hats, surveyors with flags. They were already preparing to clear trees. I slammed on the brakes, jumped out, and stormed up to the nearest guy. "You're trespassing." He didn't even flinch. "We've got permits. Talk to your HOA. "I'm not in the HOA. He just pointed to a clipboard. "This here says we can work." I snatched the paper. It was a copy of the fake deed, signed with a scribble that wasn't mine. I was still arguing when Ellie pulled up behind me in her truck. She walked over, took one look at the document, and snorted. "That's not a real signature. I've seen toddlers write better." We took pictures, then called Ramirez. But just then, another black SUV pulled onto the gravel road and outstepped a man I hadn't seen before. Tall, expensive suit, dark glasses. He adjusted his cufflinks like he owned the whole ranch. "Noah Jacobs," he said, voice like oil. "I'm Richard Knox, representing Sunset Valley's legal department." He held out a hand. "I didn't shake it," he continued. "This land is undergoing a routine development assessment. There's no need for hostility." You faked a deed, I said flatly. He smiled. You can't prove that. Oh, I can, Ellie snapped. And I will, he shrugged. By the time any of this gets to court, we'll have the road built. After that, it's just a matter of time. I stepped forward. If one tree falls on my side of the line, I'll take that bulldozer and park it in your lobby. He held my gaze for a second, then nodded to his men. Stand down for now. They packed up and left. But I knew he'd be back. That night, I pulled out every document I had on the ranch's boundaries. Old deeds, maps, even a signed letter from my grandfather years ago when he fought a zoning battle with the county. Ellie stayed up cross-referencing parcel IDs, and finally at 2:17 a.m., we found it. An archived scanned copy of the original deed with my name and signature, notarized, stating that the boundary acres were protected under family trust. It wasn't just mine, it was irrevocable. Ellie smiled. They messed up. We filed an injunction the next morning, but the drama wasn't done because as we were leaving the courthouse, Ramirez called again. Brace yourself, she said. Karen's out on bail, and her attorney is the same one who forged your deed. I stopped in my tracks. What? Name's Alan Doyle. Works under Richard Knox, known for shady loopholes. The FBI is sniffing around now, but it's going to get uglier before it gets cleaner. Ellie and I shared a look. If they couldn't beat us legally, they'd try something else. We got back to the ranch to find the front gate wide open. Not busted, not damaged, just open. And on the porch, a single white envelope. Inside it, photos of me, of Ellie, of Hank, all taken from the woods, all printed with the same handwriting in red marker. The bear is just the beginning. I stood there jaw tight, the wind brushing against my shoulders. And then I realized something chilling. One of the photos was taken from inside the garage. They'd been on my property again, and we were running out of time. The sky was dark with a slow-moving storm when I locked every door and window on the ranch. Ellie paced the living room, her sidearm on the table, laptop open, and surveillance feeds playing on every screen. The photos we found that morning taken from inside the garage were now pinned on the wall. They're planning something big, she said. I nodded, but they made a mistake coming here again. This time we're ready. Hank was in the reinforced barn, relocated and rebuilt 2 weeks after the fire. This time with steel reinforced doors, climate control, backup power, and a direct tunnel to the main house. Not for safety from him, for safety for him. Ellie reinforced the ranch's perimeter. Cameras, silent alarms, motion sensors, and in the tree line near the back of the property. She set up a hidden perch with night vision scopes. We didn't sleep that night because we knew they were coming. It started at 1:44 a.m., a soft crackle in the walkie. Perimeter breach, north fence. Ellie was already up and heading for the door. I followed, shotgun in hand, eyes sharp. 3 figures, all dressed in black. 2 by the barn, 1 circling the house. They moved like professionals, not HOA board members. These were hired men. Hold, Ellie whispered through the radio. Wait until they're inside the red zone. I clicked the safety off my shotgun. The first guy reached the barn doors and pulled out bolt cutters. He never got the chance to use them. Ellie flipped a switch. Boom. A flashbang lit up the night, blinding white. The men dropped to the ground, stunned. We stormed in. Ellie tackled one. I aimed at the second. The third ran, but not far. Ramirez's cruiser lights cut through the trees like lightning. Sirens wailed. The third man dropped his weapon and raised his hands. By dawn, they were cuffed and in custody. All 3 ex-security contractors, private hires paid in cash, and the one Ellie tackled talked. Richard Knox sent us, he confessed. We were supposed to tranquilize the bear and make it look like an escape. Blame the rancher. Then the state would seize the property. And you were going to burn it again? Ramirez asked coldly. Wasn't the plan this time, he muttered. By 9 a.m., Knox was arrested. By 11 a.m., a federal task force raided Sunset Valley's development office. By 2 p.m., it was national news again. HOA hires mercs to stage wildlife incident. Caught red-handed, Karen Monroe was arrested again for violating her bail terms and for new charges. She screamed as they shoved her into the cruiser. This isn't over. You're just a redneck. I'll get it all back. But I didn't answer. I just stood on the porch, Hank beside me, Ellie at my side, watching the last of them disappear down the road. 2 months later, the ranch was peaceful again. The trees were green. The barn stood strong. Hank was healthier than ever, even chasing butterflies like a cub. Some mornings, Ellie decided to stay a little longer, help set up a wildlife outreach program for veterans. Kids came to visit. Families took photos with Hank from a safe distance. Even a couple of national parks folks came by to talk about opening the land as a private sanctuary. And the best part, that fraudulent deed wiped clean. My land was protected permanently under state conservation status. No more HOA threats, no more land grabs, just me, the ranch, the bear, and peace. But as I sipped my coffee one crisp morning, Ellie brought over the last thing we'd been avoiding, a sealed manila envelope found under the porch steps. No return address. Inside a photo, not of me, not of Ellie, not of Hank. It was a photo of a different ranch far away. Different trees, different land, but the same style of fencing, the same type of barn. And written on the back, "You're not the only one." I looked up. Ellie was already locking the gate behind us. "Let's go," she said. "Where?" I asked. She smiled. "Wherever they think they can't be caught." So if you're out there reading this, wherever you're watching from, Texas, Ohio, Florida, California, remember something. The moment you think you're small, you're not. Even a man with nothing but a barn, a bear, and a stubborn heart can take on the powerful and win. Because in this life, it's not about how loud they scream. It's about how long you stand. And we're still standing strong, silent, and ready always.